Hello, everyone. Welcome to Can I Use This Source in a Paper? My name is Shoshana Frank. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an Information Services librarian here at Aurora University. Today, we are going to talk about what makes information trustworthy. We'll also learn how to evaluate sources and then do some practice evaluating sources to put those skills we just learned right to use. So what is a good source for college? In the next few slides, we're going to consider the elements that are needed to evaluate if a source will be good or not for your college assignment. First, let's discuss what makes information trustworthy. Write down some criteria that you consider when deciding if someone is trustworthy. Do they gossip or sensationalize? Are they experts in the field? Some examples of your instructor or professor, or if they're an information expert, such as a librarian. So you can pause the video and write down some more criteria that you think are important to decide if someone's a trustworthy source. So hopefully you came up with some great criteria, but here are a few more to consider if someone's a good source or not. So a good source would be someone who saw or heard it themselves, such as a primary source. They would be unbiased, meaning they don't have anything to gain from whatever the information is. Someone who tells the truth and really gets those details right would be considered trustworthy. Also, as we mentioned, someone knowledgeable about the topic, like a subject matter expert, or one of the many people reporting on the same thing, such as with a journalist or things along those lines. What are some not so good sources would be if they heard about it through the grapevine, if they perhaps have ulterior motives, if their information is biased, if it's someone who exaggerates or lies, or perhaps gets things wrong regularly, and if someone doesn't really understand the topic or can't understand the context in which the information is provided. So you really want to ask yourself, who is saying it? How did they get that information? And why are you deciding to trust it? So in academic context, you'll really want to closely investigate the quality of sources. And in the next few slides, we're going to explore different ways to evaluate an article for its credibility and academic value. To best accomplish if the sources that you're finding are going to have academic merit, we're going to evaluate them with the handy-dandy CRAAP test. The CRAAP test, which has 5 elements of currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose, will help us evaluate if a source is really going to strengthen our work and, most importantly, meet the requirements of the assignment. So first, currency is when you consider when the information was published, if it's still accurate and up to date, or if perhaps there's something that is more current that would be a better use for your work. Relevance is when you truly dig deep and decide if the article that you found will help you understand your topic or complete your assignment. It may be on the subject matter, but perhaps not the element that you're looking to research or consider. For authority, you want to really think about who published this. Is it a source others trust? What are their credentials? Very much hearkening back to when we talked about what makes a source trustworthy. For the accuracy, you want to consider the evidence for the claims made. Are there citations? Can you verify that information with other sources? And if it has been reviewed before publication. And finally, the purpose. Is the source trying to sell you something? Do they want to change your opinion? Is this an entertainment article, or is it used to inform? And do you think it seems biased? So considering these 5 elements will help you evaluate if a source is going to be of collegiate value. Beyond the CRAAP test, there are a few additional elements to consider. Does the article explain the information source? Do they cite a report, or do they quote an expert, someone knowledgeable on the subject matter? How was the data collected? Is that explained within the article? And if it's something that was analyzed, do they explain how they did their own research, their methodology? When considering if an article is an authority on the topic, you really want to consider the author. And that's where their expertise truly comes into play. So depending on the topic, the expertise could look like many years working in the field. It could be advanced degrees in the field or in that subject area. They could have first-person experience with the topic or with whatever it is you're researching. A key thing to keep in mind is a journalist's expertise often comes from their ability to collect and report the facts in a succinct, unbiased way. Another element to really consider is the source's perspective or the purpose of the article. So things to think about are, what is the mission of the organization that's publishing this information? Perhaps where is the funding coming from? Is this a business? Is it a corporation? Or is it a not-for-profit? What bias might be present? Are they trying to sell you on something or change your opinion on a subject? Such as, are they trying to convince you of something? Are they trying to sway you to their perspective? So you may have heard your instructors talking about peer-reviewed articles or peer-reviewed source. Something to keep in mind is that that's very different than a simple review for edits or grammar. The peer review process is very rigorous. The original authors have written their article. They have their methodology, their data, the analysis, the conclusions, really drawing the results from the experiment or the research that they conducted. They then submit it to their peers to go through and, in essence, double check their work. They verify that the methodology is clear and makes sense. They confirm that the data and the analysis are producing logical conclusions and things that are supported within the research that was done. So it's a very rigorous process, and it's different than if a publication was simply reviewed before it was published. So publications that have been reviewed before they're published are things such as trusted news sources like media outlets. They generally fact check information before they publish it. And then if they do get something incorrect, they'll release corrections to remedy that error. And then major organizations and government agencies also carefully review the information that they produce before releasing it in their reports. So while that's different than the peer review process, it's still a rigorous review work that goes into making those a trusted source. So to investigate sources, you can think about it as reading about the source or author. And you can do so by opening tabs across your screen to find out more. So you'll want to ask questions such as, how does this source describe itself? What are other people saying about the source or the company or the author? And are other sources reporting the same information, other organizations? So Wikipedia may be a great resource for you to learn about the source or the company or organization. They will often have pages about not-for-profits, companies, think tanks, etc., that can provide you a bit of insight into where the funding originates, the mission of the organization, and the perspective that they may bring to any articles. All right, so we are going to dive into some practice to put all those tools we just learned about evaluating sources to use. So we are going to be using the CRAAP test that I mentioned briefly earlier to evaluate a source. And we're going to start with currency. It is relatively straightforward, but there are definitely still elements to consider, such as when was the information published? Has it been updated? Is the information still accurate, or is it now out of date or incomplete? And some of the currency answers, deciding if it's current or not, will really be dependent upon your assignment criteria or the topic that you are working on. So, for example, a current news story will generally be within the past few days, weeks, or months, generally within the last year, whereas a government report may have been published in 2019, but is still up to date. It still has the most up-to-date information because there hasn't been another report released to supersede it, or there hasn't been any updates on those details. So you definitely want to consider currency and your assignment and what you're looking for and how that relates to the research that you're conducting. Next, we're going to talk about relevance. And we're thinking about relevancy, we really want to dig deep and to decide if this source will help you understand your topic or complete your assignment. Because it could be a great source, but if it's not relevant to your assignment, it may not be what you want to actually use for your research. For our example, we're going to consider if this is going to be relevant. So, your class paper is about how empathy can be used to inform laws. You found a short article from the New York Times called How to Practice Empathy, which offers suggestions like working on a community garden with others who are different from you. Consider this article to answer the following questions, and you'll want to pause the video to give yourself time to read the article, evaluate it, and then think about the content and if it's relevant to your assignment. The assignment, remember, is your class paper is about how empathy can be used to inform laws. So our questions to consider with this source is, will this source help you understand the topic? Will the source help you complete your assignment? Is the article focus relevant to your assignment? The article focus of how empathy can be used to inform laws, and who do you think the intended audience is? So take a moment to pause your video and consider those elements. All right, so you thought about the article, you evaluated our questions. Now let's go through it. So while the article is about empathy, it's not really specific to politicians or how they use empathy to create laws. As such, it's probably not going to be your best choice for an academic paper. For example, the intended audience is really more of everyday people, not lawmakers or academics. So there are probably better sources out there that are more relevant to your assignment. Next, we're going to talk about authority. To consider who published this, is this a source others trust, who wrote it, and what are their credentials? Using the screenshots pictured, which gives you an excerpt of an article, we're going to answer the following 4 questions. AAUW Naperville IAC published this. Do you know that organization? Is this a source that you think others would trust? Is AAUW Naperville IAC team an expert on the topic? And do you think the listed credentials make the author an authority? The credentials you can see are on the right-hand side bottom of the screen. So now pause the video and consider those questions. All right, now that you've taken a few moments to consider if AAUW Naperville IAC team is an authority for civil liberties at a local level, let's discuss those questions further. So you may not know anything about AAUW Naperville because it is a very local organization and it may be outside of your own knowledge base or expertise. So you'll definitely want to do more research to understand who they are as an organization. You can see pictured, I have a screenshot of their information from their website about their description of who they are as a not-for-profit social welfare organization. So that will probably show you or give you an idea of the perspective they're going to be bringing to an article. You can also decide if it's something that others would trust by doing further research, like that lateral opening new tabs about the organization that we discussed earlier. You can also consider if you think the listed credentials would make them an authority. Considering we're discussing the very local level, they would potentially be an authority as a very local organization. You do want to consider that authority is very contextual, so it's going to look different depending on what you're searching for, whether it's a local perspective, a national perspective, or something in between. So you definitely want to understand your assignment to understand the context that you're looking for in authority. To dig a little deeper into what I mean by authority is contextual, we discussed AAUW Naperville in a local context and that they could potentially be an authority from that local perspective. If your assignment was seeking a national perspective, then AAUW National may be a better source for you. They are a broader perspective because they cover the entire country, not just one community. And they do a lot of publications based on research and other numerical based information. So you can see with the images pictured, the image on the right has an excerpt about a gender and economic security article that they published, and in it you can see that they have footnotes included for all of the different elements that they are citing in their articles, such as the numbers and other things focused on, which, as we talked about earlier, could provide us an additional understanding of if they're an authority on the topic, that they're citing their sources, they're showing their knowledge base on the subject matter. So to reiterate, authority is very much dependent on what you're looking for, what your assignment is, and what your research is focused on. So moving forward to the next step of the CRAAP test, which is accuracy. For the second A of accuracy, we really want to consider the evidence for those claims made, looking for the citations, verification of information, and considering if it was reviewed before publication. So let's consider the screenshots that we have pictured about Chicago. The one on the left has an excerpt of an article, and then on the upper right picture, it shows you the title of the article as well as the date and author of when it was published. The lower right-hand picture is an excerpt showing the Google search that I did for the article to give you an idea of what the results look like. And then that middle image is the NPR WBEZ, is the logo of the organization that published this information. So let's consider the following questions. In this excerpt, is there evidence for the claims made about the detection system that they have included? Maybe you can look for citations, quotes, anything linked, like linked reporting. Can you verify the information other places? And if you do a little search about NPR, do you think that this article was reviewed before publication by an editor or a fact checker? So pause your video and consider those questions. Feel free to open new tabs to do that additional research that we talked about earlier. Now that you have evaluated the source to decide if it's going to be accurate, let's talk about it. So in that article, there were definitely citations, quotes, and linked reports for the evidence that, or for the claims that were made. and very much evidence to support what they were saying. So there were quotes from people involved in or knowledgeable about the topic. There were those linked reports that you could see highlighted in blue, and those you could actually click through to read the reports and possibly use those original reports for your assignment as well. You saw pictured that you could verify the information in other places. In that Google search, there were many other news outlets and publications covering the same story. And hopefully after you did your search on NPR, you perhaps found something similar to what I have pictured, showing the mission statement, along with some citations to support their claims about their efforts as an organization. You may have also found articles where NPR had to include a retraction or update a story with new information or when new details came out, which possibly contradicted the original story. All told, these elements definitely support that NPR reviews their articles before publication and would probably be a good source for you to use in terms of accuracy for your assignment. All right, so we're going to move on to our last element of the CRAAP test, which is purpose, where we're going to consider what the source focuses on. We have two sources that we're going to evaluate for this. So you can consider if it's trying to sell something, if it's intended to inform or entertain, if the information published is opinions or if they're facts, and if you think it seems biased. To evaluate the purpose of an article, we're going to consider the screenshots pictured. The top image shows the headline title of the article about climate bill, and then a small image. The bottom right-hand corner is a larger version of the image included with the article, and then the lower left-hand picture shows the logo of the publication that printed it. So with that information in mind, you can pause your video to consider if this source is trying to sell you something, or if it's intended to entertain or inform. If you think these are opinions or facts that would be included within this article, and if you think it seems biased. So take a moment to answer those questions. All right, so let's discuss the purpose of that article. The source, which is The Onion, is a satire entertainment outlet, and it definitely is more for entertainment than for information, and as such it's going to be opinion-based, not fact-based. So while it's not necessarily going to know if it's biased or not, it's going to very much have a biased perspective because it wants you to laugh. It wants the reader to find the content humorous. So probably not something that you would want to use for a college assignment because the purpose isn't fact-based or focused on academic knowledge gathering. It's much more focused on humor and entertainment. So let's consider one more article considering the purpose. So we have information pictured about squirrels. The image on the left has the logo of the organization that published it, the title of the article when it was published, and then a large image of a squirrel. The picture screenshot on the right gives you an excerpt of the article talking about squirrels. So with this information pictured, you want to consider if the source is trying to sell you something, if it is for entertainment or information, if you think these are opinions or facts about squirrels, and if you think it's biased. So you can pause the video and take a few minutes to consider. So hopefully while you were considering the article, you realized that this was an ad for a pest control company. And so it definitely was trying to sell you something. It was trying to sell their services for pest removal, specifically squirrel removal. So while the information they provided may have been factual, it was going to be a very biased perspective from a pest control company that wants squirrels to be removed from homeowners' property. So when you're considering this for your academic paper, it may not be the best source if you're seeking factual information about squirrels. There could be other sources out there that aren't trying to sell you something that may be better for your assignment. Now, if your assignment is about pest control companies or advertising, this could be a really good example of an article talking about the companies or the pest control's perspective on squirrels and other rodents. So this very much is dependent upon what your assignment is, what the information is that you're seeking, to understand if it would be of value or good for your academic paper. Now that you've built the basic foundations for evaluating sources using the CRAAP test and understanding that you have to really question and consider various elements of the sources that you're going to be using, we have a few more resources for your success here in college. So when in doubt, you want to ask for help. You can ask a librarian for help at the front desk here at the Phillips Library at Aurora University. You can live chat with a librarian by clicking on that green Ask Us tab on all of our websites. You can also submit a question via email if your question falls outside of library hours. You can, of course, make an appointment to meet with a librarian both in person and via Zoom. You can also text or call us. Basically, the library is here to help, and librarians are information experts. We can assist you in finding that quality information that you're looking for both on the web and in library databases. So there are so many different ways that we can help, whether you have too many results or too few results, or if you're not finding the relevant results that you're looking for your assignment. We can also build upon the foundation of a source evaluation that we learned today to really consider if a source is going to be trustworthy and impactful for your research. We can help you utilize and understand library resources and databases and get you that access that you need. Basically, when in doubt, you can always ask a librarian for help. So what did we learn today? That not all information is equal. We truly need to ask questions of our understanding of the sources and to learn more about their perspective and their appropriateness for college assignments. We learned the CRAAP test, the currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose of evaluating articles. We also learned that academic work requires a higher standard for sources. We can't just choose the first one that comes up. We really need to consider if it's going to be the best source for our assignment. And finally, that you can always, always, always ask a librarian for help. We are here at Phillips Library ready to assist you. You can also follow us on social media or scan our QR code to learn more. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I hope you gained some great insight into evaluating sources for collegiate use. Bye-bye.